Anybody who sits in a board meeting knows that there's two primary things that come up. Generally, we talk a lot about pipeline, both ends of it, sales and receivables. And the other thing that comes up a lot is HR issues, hiring and firing. And I've been hearing some horror stories lately at board meetings, in particular on the firing side. And easier said than done, but sometimes needs to be done. And it's like, you don't believe me, so I got an expert. So, Connie, come on up.
Morning, everyone. Morning. Similar to Anna, who is part Spanish, part Italian, I'm all Italian, so there's no way that I'm going to be behind that podium. That would just kill me. It's an honor to be here today to talk to you all about the very important and critical topic of human resources. And along the way, hopefully I'll be able to share with you some real-time, day-to-day, in-the-trenches type of information. Not necessarily the kind of stuff that you're going to learn by buying some book in Barnes & Noble that claims to be able to tell you how to do human resources. Kind of stuff we'll talk about, and I'll share with you is probably stuff they don't want to put in writing, but I'm going to help you with. So before we get started with my presentation, I'm going to spend a minute or two telling you a little bit about myself. I am president of Ridgedale Business Solutions, and we provide human resources services and solutions to primarily small and mid-sized businesses. And along the way, you'll learn a little bit more about how we define HR. So I've been doing HR work for like 25 years, that I'll admit to. And I started when I was 10, and I'm sticking with that. I tried that once in front of my father, and he said, "Constance, I was there." I'm like, "Oh yeah, can't claim that in front of you." So along the way, most of that experience was in big corporate, helping to design and lead HR departments, mostly in financial services, brokerage and banking. And then for some reason, towards the end of 2006, 2007, I had this great idea to leave corporate and start my own company to provide a similar type of level of services to small and mid-sized businesses. So I started my company. And my mother started lighting candles at church every day. I think she was afraid I was going to fail and move back home. I'm like, "No, Ma, don't worry about that." So then a few months later, after I was all energized about starting my business, then the economy crashed. Now I heard God start laughing. I'm like, "Great. How many more strikes are going to be against me?" But regardless of that, somehow we hit on a niche that is completely underserved when it comes to HR services. And hopefully along the way you'll learn sort of how it differentiates. So, probably one of the most difficult and challenging parts of my job is helping people to understand exactly what HR is and what it isn't. I'll let the plane go by. And that's actually what we're going to start with in the first slide, because I tell you, there's probably about 50 some odd people here, and I can go around the room and ask everybody what HR is, and I'll probably get about 50 different answers. Because it is so broad, the umbrella of what HR truly is huge. Some people will say, "What, you're an employment agency?" We'll go, "Well, no, but we do hiring and everything." "Oh, you're a benefits broker?" So all these different opinions, depending on what their interactions with someone in HR might or might not have been. So we're going to help to define that here as we go along. Hey, I did it right. Okay. So even if you come out of like big corporate and you have these in-house HR departments, you probably don't have a really good idea about what HR is. Because they're behind these locked doors and everything is confidential, and you're like, "I don't know, they're in there developing weapons of mass destruction?" I mean, nobody really knows. Because quite frankly, most of what happens in HR is confidential. If the board of directors sends out a dictate that says, "Guess what, we're going to have to lay off 10% of our staff," it's not something you can talk about at lunch, with your coworkers. So it's one of the things that puts me behind the 8 ball when I try and help people understand it. What you see in front of you here is a typical part of what HR tends to encompass, the various different functions of HR. Recruiting and hiring, certainly. We're not an employment agency, but it's certainly an essential part of what we do. Benefit plans, medical, dental, life, all that stuff you hear about. Pay programs, compensation. What should you be paying somebody? It's a fair salary. You know, I have a client out in Western Jersey that is part of helping with an employee problem, and I was collecting information about the employee, how long she's been employed by you, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is a woman that does like a customer service counter type of position when somebody brings in repairs of mechanical items. So it's sort of very entry level. She doesn't repair them herself, she just intakes it. Okay, how long has she been there? Fine. How much do you pay her? He says, $85,000. I started getting chest tightness. I'm like, you pay her what? I'm like, okay, help me understand why you're paying her that. Well, that's what she asked for when I hired her. That's what she told me she needed. Okay, HR helps to define what's a fair and compensable type of salary along the way. Employee issues and problems, we'll get to that in a little bit. Employee handbooks, writing them in a customized way that meets laws and regulations. Job descriptions, helping you define why does the job exist in your organization. Training, individual, group training. Risk reduction and avoidance. If there's one area that is so critical to what HR helps with, it's that area. A lot of people feel like they can go it alone. It's not a really big deal. The employment law area is actually the most highly regulated and legislated, bar none. And if you think about industry like financial services, all the regulations and laws, you're like, oh my God, it's insane. Employment law is even far beyond that. And then the recognition programs. Well, you know, we realize that it's not all the bad stuff. You know, we don't subscribe to the management style of it feels so good when the beating stops. Yeah, we want to recognize them along the way also. So that's all of what we do. Now, because of our very limited time here today, I've really only selected 2 areas, recruiting and hiring and the employee issues, to try and delve into a little bit more in detail. You also have, though, a takeaway, you know, in your handout that will provide a little bit more rounded information about all the different topics along the way, hopefully. We tried not to give you too much. You know, we started with a binder about this thick and whittle it down for you. So let's talk about interviewing and recruiting and hiring. Why bother interviewing? Some new business owners say, you know what, I don't need to interview. I'm going to hire my wife's brother's cousin's neighbor's kid. Because they tell me he's a good kid. And that means he's going to be a good worker. And that's a very typical approach. The purpose of interviewing is to select and hire the best qualified person for the position you have available. Because quite frankly, you want them to help you make more money, right? Isn't that why we're all in business? I know that's why I'm in business. However, interviewing, we all know, is kind of like being on a bad blind date. You don't know each other. You're nervous as hell. And all you're talking about is work. So I fully recognize, and you should too, that it scares the bejesus out of you to have to sit in front of somebody and interview them. So that what happens is, in the absence of overcoming that, we revert to just human type of behavior, meaning how we socially interact with each other. And that's where you get into danger. Because that's when you'll sit there, and if you're unprepared and you let the nervousness take over you, you're going to end up ending with conversations that you shouldn't in an interview. First thing you want to say is, so how are you doing today? And the candidate says, well, you know, I had some problems getting here, lots of traffic, and by the way, my kids, my wife couldn't take them to school because, you know, she was just diagnosed with cancer, and so I have to take care of that, and they're going to go into this. And all that stuff that we just said is completely illegal. So we just don't want to go down that road. So the best way to help overcome the nerves is, as Tommy said earlier, plan and prepare, right? Really simple. It doesn't need to be complex. We start out with identifying why the job exists in the organization. That's easy. You don't need some formal type of thing for the purposes of this. Let's say you're hiring for a receptionist job. Why does it exist in the organization? Well, I don't know, answer the phones, sign for packages, greet people, sort the mail. There you go. There's your job description. And then what type of skills and experience are you looking for that? Do you need someone that already knows how to answer an XYZ switchboard? Do you need someone that already has receptionist experience? So all you do is kind of put that down on paper. Then you write an ad and you place it. Lots of job boards out there, Craigslist, NewJersey.com, Monster, LinkedIn, depending on the type of position you're looking for. Writing those classified ads can be really tricky also. Because what I see is the classic mistakes of a business owner saying, oh yeah, they've got to be a high school graduate. Well, guess what? That's completely illegal to ask. And again, I could do an employment law class that would be hours and hours to help with insight about all that, but just be very careful about how you write the ad. So then you get resumes and you start looking at them. On paper, which ones look absolutely qualified based on this great general job description that you made? Okay, you identified 3 or 4 of them. Call them. Do a phone interview or call them in. Now I'm thinking if it's a receptionist position, or like when I was, back in my corporate days, I was recruiting for positions like for a call center, I would want to do interviews over the phone. Because I want to hear what they sound like on the phone, because that's kind of their job. So you want to listen for things like, do they have a heavy accent? It's perfectly fine to rule someone out if you can't understand them over the phone, if their job is talking over the phone. Create consistent interview questions. Now there's 2 types of questions that you should absolutely have in place. And you really should be consistent with the questions that you ask each candidate. Because if not, then that's where you come into a little bit of a risk. If you ask one candidate a question and then not the rest of them, it can be viewed as discriminatory, and there's all kinds of shades of problems that can come up. So again, I encourage you guys just to write down questions to refer to. There's nothing wrong with a manager referring to a piece of paper along the way, in any situation, especially when it comes to HR. Because I always say, when you have it down, it's kind of like a script. And then you don't have to worry about going off script, because that's usually when people get themselves into trouble. One of the other classic examples is if somebody is being fired, and the first thing that manager says is, I feel really bad about having to do this. You're killing me. Stick to the script. So we'll ghost write scripts for managers, and I'll say, stick to the script. So they'll sit there at the table. Susie Q, I've asked you here to meet me today in order to continue, talk about your continued lack of blah, blah, blah. Don't go off the script, please, because that's when you get into trouble. So 2 types of questions. The first is the tactical base, the actually skill-based types of things that you want to reinforce that they have. Have you used the XYZ phone system before? Tell me about that experience. Have you had receptionist experience? You said you have 5 years, etc. Okay, that's the skill set part of it. More importantly is here, the behavioral part of it. This is the stuff as it says down there. The vast majority of failures, and I'm talking like 90% of failures, have nothing to do with if somebody has the skill to do it. It has to do with the behaviors. Now the behaviors is everything but the skill part of it. Because as we all know, success in any position is not just defined as did they get the job done. For instance, maybe like a senior accountant where they have to do like bank recs and month-end close. If they manage to get that done in a timely manner, but they piss everybody else off in the company while they're doing it, while they're collecting data, that's not success in the position. Can't play well with others, right? Simply put. So the behavior questions are the more important ones, where the best predictor of future success is past performance. Anybody heard that before? That's real simple. Ask them these kind of questions. Oh, you put on your resume here that you set up a new system, blah, blah, blah. Tell me a little bit more about that. Any question that can't be answered with just a yes or no. It's give me more insight. How did it impact the department? How did you handle that? That's okay, those are behavior questions. So I encourage you to focus a lot on those. I'm sure you guys have seen this kind of topic list before, kind of stuff you can't ask about, right? This is written by a lot of people. And again, I wish I had time to spend hours and hours going through all this, but this is the kind of stuff that you really cannot ask about and you cannot know about, either during the interview process or once they're hired. Age, arrest record, right? You can ask about, you can find out about convictions. You can't know about arrests. So all these legalities that fall in under that. Medical and health related, we all know about HIPAA and privacy, FCRA type stuff, bankruptcies, financial problems, disabilities, perceived disabilities, anything concerning a DMV record, unless it's what we call job necessary. You're hiring somebody for a truck driving job. Then it becomes a requirement. Age, height, weight, marital status, married, not married, how many kids do you have, where do you live, are they a member of any protected class, veteran, religious affiliation? And this sort of reinforces why I strongly suggest that you write down the questions in advance, because absent that, you're going to get into conversations that are going to put you at risk. One of the other classic mistakes, I'm not sure if it's on one of the slides in the future or not, is that Inexperienced interviewers will look to hire somebody that is like themselves. It's a natural human instinct. We want to associate ourselves with people that are like us, right? That's how we choose our friends, your wife, your spouse, or whatever. So it's a classic mistake to interview somebody and go, oh, you belong to the same synagogue as me. Great, you're hired. That must make you a good employee. It doesn't. So be aware of what you're doing there and make sure that you're hiring the best qualified people. Back in my corporate days, I had a payroll manager that I truly didn't like. I just didn't like him. But he actually followed me when I changed companies twice because he loved working for me. Because he was a great payroll manager. I didn't like him personally, but I didn't need to. I'm not there to socialize with him. I'm there to help lead the department. So keep that in mind about yourselves. Common mistakes, not differentiating between things candidates can learn and things they can't. And this gets into, if you identify somebody, and we'll go to that receptionist type position again, that has a great behavioral type of response to your questions. So it kind of tells you they have the kind of front desk personality and demeanor that you want sitting there. But they've never used the PBX phone switchboard system. Okay, can you train them on that? I'm thinking probably, yeah, in about 5 or 10 minutes. So that could be trainable, but you can't train someone on like personality. So it's something to help differentiate for you. Expecting perfection. I'm not perfect. I don't think anybody else is. So don't try for perfection. Even back again, I go back to my corporate days, and I could probably stand here all day just telling stories. As part of me leading a department, one of my employees came in and challenged me on a decision I made. And we discussed it, and that's fine. But then she said something to the effect of, well, that means you made a mistake. And she was really angry. And I looked at her, I said, how dare you expect perfection from me? I look back now, I go, well, that wasn't the best leadership style, was it? So no, I'm not perfect either. Not being upfront about details. Let's say you're a CPA firm, hiring people for, like, as a tax preparer. You kind of want to tell them maybe between January 15th and April 30th, they might not be seeing their family. They're going to be working Saturdays, Sundays, 24 hours, et cetera, et cetera. Don't let that come as a surprise. And asking questions that are not relevant to the job or are inappropriate. That's why I tell managers that don't interview a lot, please don't enter into any social conversations. The only thing that I would recommend that you ask is something as, just to break the ice when they walk in the door, say, oh, any trouble finding us, our location or something as innocuous as that. Other than that, I wouldn't go into anything else, unless you're really experienced at interviewing. So that's a little bit about interviewing. Again, I wish I had a little bit more time to go into a lot of detail. There's so much in the handout. I know there are some do's and don'ts in there for you to follow through. I want to spend a little bit more time on employee relations, because as much as I put up the functions of HR, the primary functions, employee relations is by far my favorite. Now, a lot of people run screaming for the hills when it comes to employee relations, because again, it has to do with somebody wanting to do anything possible to avoid having to sit in front of someone and tell them that they're doing something wrong. I've seen CEOs turn to jelly having to do that. And most people want to avoid it, other than, I guess, weirdos like myself in HR. I love the idea of being able to come in and intervene and help resolve issues, either successfully. In other words, as a business owner, what you want is for that employee's job performance to turn around and for them to become a successful employee, right? Unless you want to manage them out of your organization, in which case we can affect that also. So dealing with this area is a lot of what differentiates companies, HR experts, from doing what we call personnel, which is sort of administrative in nature. There are a lot of HR consulting firms out there that will say, great, you need a performance appraisal system, here you go, here's a binder, have at it, good luck. That's personnel versus HR, which is consultative in nature, tells about the situation, let's design something appropriate, simple, et cetera, for you to use. So that's sort of the difference. It's the same thing when it comes to employee relations. A lot of HR experts, even in-house or consulting companies, don't want to touch employee relations. Creates tremendous liability for them as a company, because they're helping to guide managers and business owners in making decisions about the continued employment of an individual that could end up in a court of law. So even some of the bigger HR consulting firms won't touch it. You call them with an issue when it comes to an employee problem, they'll say, I'm sorry, we don't handle it. Whereas to me, this is the most important thing. This is what I've found since I started my business. Business owners will pay anything for. I literally have a client in South Orange that over the past couple of years used us for a little bit of HR stuff, kind of went away. You know what, I have my husband's cousin who does HR. I'm like, yeah, okay, let me know how that works for you. And eventually, after a couple of years, I should have tape recorded it. She called me on the phone and she said, I will pay you anything. Tell me what your monthly retainer is. Just come fix these employee situations. This is the stuff that keeps you awake at night. You know, simply put, I tell business owners and prospects, business is great and then you hire your first employee. And that's when all the crap starts happening. That's what we do, is we take it all off your shoulders. We will guide, coach, counsel. We will be just someone to talk to. Again, I have a client that owns a private investigation firm, and he recently bought another company, a recycling plant. I don't understand that business model, but whatever. So he's driving over one day to this recycling plant, and he called me on the phone. I said, hey, John, what's going on? He says, I've had it with this employee. They think they're a shop steward, but they're not unionized. And he's pissing me off no end. He said, I'm done with him. I'm going over there to kill him. Now, he's licensed to carry a concealed weapon. And I'm going, okay, now tell me what's going on. Nope, I'm going to go kill him. And I'm like, no, pull over, let's talk. He says, no, that's it, I'm going to go kill him. I'm like, pull over! He just needed somebody to talk him off the ledge, give him some advice on how to handle it, what to say to this employee. That's what HR does best versus personnel. And we will handle everything from the very minor. Hey, Susie Q keeps coming in late. I've talked to her 3 times. She calls in every Friday. Help, what do I do? On up to major investigations. Law firms will hire us to go in and do investigations because they're conflicted out if they're representing management. So we'll do investigations, discrimination, harassment, secret claims, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the realm of employee relations, and to me, that's the value of what HR brings to you guys the best, is someone being able to help them, because you don't want to go it alone. You know, not knowing what you don't know, which I think one of the slides says. Is that too many negatives? I don't know. Burying your head in the sand is really what you don't want to do. So, the effective use of corrective action and discipline offers you and your company important benefits. It establishes expectations and predictability. If, God forbid, you ever end up in a court of law trying to defend your actions, the judge or jury is going to look for, did you tell the employee the requirements? Did you tell them what they were doing wrong? Did you give them an opportunity to improve it? Did you tell them what would happen if they did not improve it? If you can establish those tenets and prove that, then you're golden. And that's the standard that most HR people use, is we always look to, can we defend this in a court of law? Which means, quite frankly, I know from my personal perspective, I do not support something called progressive discipline. I'm sure you've all heard of that. Got to give them 3 verbals, 4 warnings, a final, suspension, blah, blah, blah. I think to myself, no. Unless you're bound by a union contract or some other form of regulatory requirements for that, I don't support that at all. You need to be able to make a decision appropriate to the situation. The dramatic example of that is I tell people, all right, progressive discipline. So in other words, if your employee walks in here tomorrow with a gun and shoots someone, you give them a verbal. But if you do it again, we're going to give you a written. Like, no. You want to be able to fire them. You know, don't let the door hit you. And again, that's where HR people will come in to help you. Because all we have to do is make sure that we're handling similar situations in a similar manner, which leaves you free to fire certain people for certain situations, or you know what, if somebody arrived late for work, maybe the second time in the past 12 years, you might not even want to do a verbal. Just talk to them. Hey, what's going on? So that's where HR helps you with. So be careful of that. Again, applying the consequences consistently, correcting behaviors and poor job performance is really what you want. Protects against complaints and lawsuits, and protects the company by documenting. I'm sure everybody's heard of documentation, right? So documentation could be something as simple as, if you have one of those little flip calendars, you know, on your desk, and you write on any given day, I spoke to Susie Q about her coming in late every Friday. That's evidence. It's discoverable. You can provide that in support if ever challenged through the EEOC or courts with, did we ever document? That's documentation of a verbal discussion. So again, HR will help you with those kind of things and understanding what documentation is and what is not. why it's critical to handle it appropriately. Lawyers agree more cases are won or lost based on documentation. And that's why a lot of times HR people may say to you, well, if we're going to do something and give them a written warning, you really want to have a witness in the room. Some people may not know why. But in the absence of that, you're going to claim as a company, well, yeah, I spoke to her about coming in late every Friday, and she's going to go, yeah, I met with her, we talked about the upcoming holiday party. All right, so you really at times want to have a witness there in order to witness the meeting. Now who that is, you don't want to have like one of their coworkers there, it's another member of your supervisory team if possible, or an HR person. Juries like to have something to hang their hats on. Because, in my field, we know that a lot of times, in the absence of documentation and evidence, juries are going to make decisions not necessarily based on what evidence there is, they're going to make decisions based on their feelings. That's just well known in my field. So the more documentation we can show them, the more evidence we have, the better off we are in supporting our position. So again, most HR people will always use that standard of, can we prove this in a court of law? And that is your golden approach to any situation. Basics of employee relations, ground rules and guiding policies have to be clearly communicated to employees. Well, that's why a lot of companies at a certain point want to have a handbook. I've written handbooks for clients that just have one employee. He said, I know I'm going to be hiring more. I don't want to have to worry about this stuff. Questions about how many days off I get, what's our policy concerning XYZ, lunch breaks, etc. He says, I want it documented now. That's kind of what a handbook's purpose is, one of the reasons. Because that's one of the first things that any complainant, an attorney representing, complainant will ask for is wants your handbook. Because that's where you tell people, here's the guidelines. Yeah, you got to be here by 9 o'clock. That's when our business starts. That doesn't mean come in at 9 o'clock, hang up your coat, go get a cup of coffee, check with your peeps on Facebook first, and then go get breakfast, and then start working maybe 20 after. And I did that once. I had to do a disciplinary warning to someone in banking back in my corporate days. And we sat with this employee at the bridge. We said, you come in, this is what you do, you hang up your coat, and like 25 minutes later, you finally start working. And just to be dramatic, I said to her, so in other words, what you're telling me, because you're admitting it, is you have stolen 25 minutes of time from this bank every day for the last 6 months. Now, usually I do that for drama, because then you want a reaction, oh my God, I'm so sorry. She looks at me, she goes, yep, pretty much. Like, shoot, what do I do now? Where do I go now with this? That was a surprising one. Develop a consistent approach to handling issues, and again, I encourage you not to go it alone. Whether it's talking to your boards, about how these things are traditionally handled, or referring to an HR expert, you really don't want to go it alone, because there might be something that you don't know about that will affect your decision. Some of the most common problems: dress code, attendance, appropriate behavior. And again, there's varying degrees of this. In my career, I've handled everything from the very, very minor on up to things like bombs, guns, drugs. Broker going after a sales assistant with a baseball bat trying to kill her because she didn't take a phone message right. It's pretty amazing, because over the years, my family says to me, you should really write a book. And I say, no one would believe that life is stranger than fiction, that this stuff really happens. And it has nothing to do with whether or not they're a $5 million producer on Wall Street or a union person in a uniform. Doesn't matter. What motivates behavior is consistent. And maybe that's why I'm passionate about what I do, because every day is very different. I had a client recently that I coached and counseled her on handling an employee issue that was really serious, and we needed to remove her from the environment for a few days to do a cool down period. Well, the owner decided whether or not she just wanted to fire her. So it's okay, call her into your office. Don't be sitting down, because that gives her the impression that she can discuss it with you. This is not a discussion. This is, hey, we need you to go home for a few days, paid leave, come back, and we'll see where things are. Well, the employee slammed her office door, trapped her in there, took her car keys, and threw them out the second-story window, because she called me afterwards. And then the owner tried to run down to her car. The employee followed her down to her car and plopped herself in the passenger side and wouldn't get out. And I'm listening to this going, oh my God, who would have thought? Yeah. I'm like, okay, have you called the police? She's like, well, we don't want a police car in the parking lot. I'm like, I'll be there in 10 minutes. What would you like me to do? So human behavior is completely unpredictable, and that's why I love every day that I wake up. Common traps and pitfalls along the way, as I've talked about, whether it's just to these two areas that we've focused on a little bit, or any other area of HR. Can you handle it yourself? It's a common mistake. You don't know what you don't know, but as successful business owners, you do know when to call in an expert. Right, at a certain point, I'm not going to do my tax filings. I have an accountant that does that. I fully acknowledge and admit I know nothing about it. So know when you have to call on either the people in the advisory board or experts in order to help you. Underestimating the impact to you and your business. A lot of times what I hear is you know what, this is no big deal as far as employee relations, because I have EPLI insurance. Anybody have that or ever heard of it? Liability insurance. They say, let the insurance company worry about it. I go, okay, great. So you still have to pay a deductible, and then they are taking the decision out of your hands about how to handle it. Whether or not they settle, whether or not they move forward in the court of law is out of your hands. I said, okay, so maybe you can afford that deductible. I said, the most important thing that you're not going to be able to overcome. I said, if your name and the your company name appears on the front page of the local paper, there's no way to overcome that. I said, the last thing I want to do is see any of my clients on the front page of the paper. Susie Q, employee of XYZ company, filed discrimination charge pending an investigation. I said, you might as well close your doors and hand over a blank check, because there's no way to overcome that. So I don't want to see any of you guys there or any of my clients there. Hesitation due to fear of knowing about a problem, the old head in the sand type of approach. Fear of the government, because the Department of Labor, and this is the stuff that I keep in touch with, a lot day to day. Department of Labor Wage and Hour Division putting on 100 new investigators to go out and target small and mid-sized businesses for violation of paying overtime. This is real stuff. And I have a client that was actually has 2 employees, and he got caught in that web. So now he's on their target. He's on their radar, and about every 6 months, I didn't do that, whatever it is. About every 6 months, he'll have one of the investigators knocking on his door saying, let me see your payroll records. You don't want to be on their target. You really don't. Not being able to concentrate on business, if you need to change your attention and focus on all of these employee issues, and you can't focus on the business of business. And the not knowing what they don't know, I don't even know if that's grammatically correct. In other words, if I don't know about it, then it's not a problem. So I think I managed to cover a lot in a few minutes. I know I was talking really fast. That was on purpose, because I have limited time. But hopefully we have time for any questions that you might want to ask of me now, or I'll be here afterwards if you want to ask something one-on-one. Yes, sir?
I think you gave a fabulous presentation, but my question is, when you have the list of don't ask questions, and you caveat it with the driver's license, because I do have staff that need to be on the road, and if I'm hiring for a particular position, I got to be able to ask them, do you have a valid legal driver's license? The other situation I run into, and Paul kind of touched on it for a door, I have a contract at Picatinny. For me to put anyone on Picatinny, they got to do a criminal investigation of everything. So how can I not ask an employee if I'm looking to hire them to put them on Picatinny, do you have a criminal record?
And those are good questions. Hopefully everybody heard it about focusing in on the driver's license background, being able to ask that kind of question or not, or utilize the information you might find out in a background investigation. There are certain requirements, DOD, DOT standards that require, and financial services that also require a much different in-depth style of background investigations. And the DMV report can be utilized for purposes of those. Those are sort of the exceptions, the asterisks after that. In general, unless you can prove that it's, in legal terms, called a BFOQ, a bona fide occupational qualification. In other words, you're hiring for someone that will be driving a company vehicle, then you are perfectly fine pulling a DMV report and utilizing that information.
And if I'm hiring them to work on a project where the client mandates a criminal investigation?
Yes, I've had that, right.
For that as well.
Yep, absolutely, right? Yep, and that's all we have to be able to defend, because if you get challenged, they'll say, well, why did you pull the DMV record? And you'll say, here I have a client who does direct contracting of $10,000 or more with the federal government. There's different standards for DOD and DOT. Yeah. Absent something like that, though, where it comes into being challenged is some of the agencies are saying, well, credit also. In this kind of economy, can you really hold someone accountable for having bad credit if they've been out of work and they couldn't help it in a bankruptcy, et cetera? The same with driving records. There are certain states that are a lot more strict. Pennsylvania is like one of the leading entities So sometimes it varies state by state about what you can use and what you can pull. Years ago, and I'm very experienced at interpreting background investigations, because as a manager, you don't want to look at the background investigation report. It puts you in the front line of liability. So I recommend you use an outside expert, because they're going to potentially get information that might include an arrest record, in which case it's illegal to know that, or information about a bankruptcy and you don't want to know about that, or a DMV record. But to me, when I look at it, I have to be very careful in how I'm interpreting it. Because when I look at certain things, in some ways you're looking at a background investigation to determine how someone is managing their life. If they have horrendous credit, and they've declared bankruptcy pro se 3 times in the last 21 years, and they've run up their balances again. And oh, by the way, their DMV record shows a pattern of not paying their parking tickets, and they received a summons, they failed to appear in court, and their license is suspended, and there's a bench warrant out for them. Again, it's a dramatic example. It was actually a real one. I think to myself, this person can't follow the rules of society. What makes you think they're going to follow your rules? So it can be at times indicative of certain behavioral characteristics, sometimes not. Good question. Question was, what if they share that with you in the interview? This is where you have to be careful about how you pose the questions. I strongly encourage, I know it's going to sound kind of off balance, if somebody starts offering information about something in their background, or again, the things like, well, I was just, what's that gap in employment I had? Well, I was diagnosed with cancer. You literally have to hold up their hand and just say, I appreciate that you would want to share that with me. Unfortunately, I don't want to take any of that into consideration for you as a candidate. You literally have to shut them down in as gentle a way as possible. Did you have a question?
Yeah, and I can feel my entire board staring at me. Because one of the greatest challenges I have is I have a team member who has a very a bold nickname that we go by. And she basically has a hold on me. She's an incredible salesperson, but she knows she has a hold on me, so I can't fire her because she does great sales numbers. But I've basically been a doormat for her for the last 2.5 years. But I know I need to make some changes, and that is so that I can, make some money for a change, and that, reduce benefits, whatever that is. Therein lies the challenge. How do I keep morale up, take hold of her, whereas I'm the leader and I'm the boss, and change that relationship after 2.5 years?
Someone behind you waving his hand, right?
Yeah, I feel for
Somebody else.
I'm not even on your board. The answer is there's lots of salespeople, and anybody who's a big enough ass to cause you trouble in the office, you're going to be so happy when you shoot them. Shoot them. Document and shoot them.
or blow them up.
Don't take that literally.
Welcome to my world every day. This is the kind of stuff that HR works with, and the kind of stuff you're bringing to the table here is very, very typical. I encourage you to ask for help, because there are ways. When you were telling me about the situation, the first question I had is, okay, tell me what the thing is that the person has a hold over you, and then we work from there. Because all I want to know is, what do you want to achieve? And HR will get you there, no doubt about it. The only thing that I've said for the past 25 years, that's what I said, 25 years is the only thing I cannot fix is if you have already fired them. I have only fixed that once in my life successfully without going to litigation. Absent that, there's nothing that we can't fix, nothing that we can't overcome. Seriously, but it has to do with that expertise. You do what you do best, HR does what they do best. So these are very typical, especially when it comes to salespeople. Companies struggle with this. They go, yeah, but it's my revenue producers. Yeah, but he's an arrogant, blah, blah, blah. And go, yeah, okay, where's that limit? And let's see how we can get there without completely disrupting the entire environment of the company. Because change is difficult. Nobody likes change. Again, except for weirdos like myself. So I encourage you to ask for help from, whether you want to call me, call an HR expert. HR is there to help with exactly those situations.
So you're going to call them
So I actually had, last story and then I'm out of time. Business owners, and again, I fully recognize that this is not what people do best, is confronting people. And I actually have a client who's a CPA financial planning firm, and he needed to let go of a registered rep, Series 7, right? because he found out she was actually building her own business behind his back. Like, oh my God, that's a big no-no. We're going to hit her, you fought. So he says, I'm mad as a hornet, develop the information, we're going to meet her at the local diner. Okay, he and I get there first, she's going to meet us there, and he says, just let me have my say. I've got to let this woman know how she has, angered me and betrayed me. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll give you a couple minutes to talk, and then I'll deliver the paperwork and all. The woman gets there, sits down, he looks at her and goes, Connie, I have something to tell you. Okay. Even when it came to the point we had to go outside into the parking lot to get her laptop and everything, he stayed in the diner. I'm like, you chicken. But that's okay. We can do that too. We will help however little or however much that you need. So I think I'm out of time though. So I thank you all for your attention.